O Senhor é o meu pastor, nada me faltará. Deitar-me paz em verdes pastos, me guia mansamente a águas tranquilas, refrigera minha alma. Me guia pelas veredas da justiça, por amor do seu nome. Me guia pelas veredas da justiça, por amor do seu nome. Ainda que eu andasse pelo vale da sombra da morte, não temeria mal algum, porque tu estás comigo. Tua vara e o teu cajado me consolam. Preparam uma mesa perante mim, na presença dos meus inimigos. Unges a minha cabeça com óleo, o meu cálice transborda. Certamente que a bondade e a misericórdia me seguirão todos os dias da minha vida. E habitarei na casa do Senhor por longos dias. Habitarei na casa do Senhor por longos dias. Por longos dias, por longos dias.
Amen. Those that were here in Sabbath school say it's unique in the Portuguese for dwell in the house of the Lord forever. They say for long days. Okay, so.
Did you like the sound of Portuguese? A lot of people say that our language has a singing tone to it, and singing
Is that me or
is is like a Hebrew. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a Jewish by blood. So when I hear Jewish songs, it calms me down. I don't know. And listening to Portuguese is the same way. It calms me down. It's amazing how the psalms being in music just calms you down.
Okay, we can go past this. This is just the scripture reading, which we already did. Okay, go ahead one more. So we call this sermon God Works and Man Works. And the idea behind this is that I wanted to show how God kind of worked in us before we ever knew he was working. And I'm sure this applies to everybody. This is just our experience. But then once he starts working in your heart and you know about it, what he expects from you. So God does the work first, and then it's up to man and woman to work out what God is working in us. Okay. Go ahead, one more. And we get this, back up one. We get this from a quote from Ellen White. It says here, the work of gaining salvation is one of co-partnership, a joint operation. There is to be cooperation between God and the repentant sinner. This is necessary for the formation of right principles in the character. Man is to make earnest efforts to overcome that which hinders him or her from attaining to perfection, but he is wholly dependent upon God for success. Next. Next. Sorry. Okay, going on. Human effort of itself is not sufficient. Without the aid of divine power, it avails nothing. God works and man works. Resistance of temptation must come from man, who must draw his power from God. On the one side, there is infinite wisdom, compassion, and power. On the other is weakness, sinfulness, and absolute helplessness. So we want to make it very clear We don't present nothing to God except our willingness. And then God takes over from there. Okay, next. So let's talk about how God works. I'm going to turn it over to my wife, and she's going to present a little bit about her past. Next. So this is her story. That's her first name, Ellen Rabbit Coelho.
When the Jew families went to Brazil to hide themselves, they changed their last names to animals and trees. So my last name in Portuguese is Rabbit Coelho. My mother was a widow very early in life, and I was still a baby. Here, my mother is the three of us, and my grandmother, being my mother's mother, right before her death. My mother lost her husband in 1 year, the following year, my grandmother, and the following year, her father. So in 3 years, she lost husband and parents. And very soon after that, she was alone with us. She did not give us for adoption. But my father's side, that is more strong on the Jewish traditions, they helped my mother to raise us. So that way we moved closer to my father's family, and they helped my mother raise us. My oldest brother in yellow, he was 7 when my father died. Eber in blue, he was 3 going 4, and I was just 10 months old, 11 months old, somewhere there. I grew up being Adventist. I'm 3rd generation Adventist. So I went through the schools, all the teachings, and left Brazil in 89, coming to US. My boyfriend was already in US for 2 years, and we wanted to know where our relationship would be after 2 years. So I never went back after that. We got married in New York. If you pass the slide, and it was in New York that I found myself involved with food. Our marriage didn't work out, and I ended up by 93 alone with a child and needing a job. People seeing my foods that I always took to church and potluck. This lady that was the cook for the United Nations in New York, she started contacting ambassadors to see if somebody would take me in as a cook. So that is when I found out that I liked to cook. So our Brazilian church in New York put me in charge of a couple of things. And here was one time in 93 that we had the anniversary of our Brazilian church in New York. And then I was in charge of making all the food. We basically did raw foods, and it was beautiful. The tables were beautiful. That is how I became accustomed to being in the kitchen, and I found out that it was part of me to be in the kitchen. Like Jerry always say, I'm always cooking, even though we do only 2 meals, but I'm always in the cook. Okay.
Okay, next. We'll give you my story. My wife's the lifer, I'm the convert. So next. And since I included one of her, I had to include one of me, right? If you notice, she's the youngest of 3. I'm the youngest of 3. She has 2 older brothers. I have 2 older sisters. Her oldest brother was born 3 days before my oldest sister was. Kind of after that, the similarities start to end. So it's kind of unique even in that aspect. Okay, next. our family were not Christian, but we did at least go one time, and I take it was this picture from Easter Sunday, 1971. And the reason I know this is that because I was given a Bible then, and that Bible followed me everywhere, and I mean everywhere. The only thing bad about it was a New Revised Standard, and I tried to read it at one time as I got older, and it was just totally, I hate to say it's about a Bible, but I still have to say it, awful. I could not understand it. But I carried it around as a talisman. Did I believe in God? Not really. I did believe there was a higher being. I still remember even in school that evolution was a stupid concept and where they came up with this at. But I didn't ever really give myself wholly to God either. So I won't get too much into my background, but it was kind of bad. But that day, if you ever wonder about it, though, children, especially when they're young, boy, you start injecting them with some of Christianity and let it hold on, because it would take, let's see, roughly, 25 more years for it to finally kick in, but it did. Okay, next. But I became a medic in the Army when I got out of school. I didn't want to necessarily do this. I wanted to be a military police, but I was still 17. They said, you can't get a weapon permit. So I said, what else you got? They said, well, how about medic? And I said, excellent. So I became a medic. The middle picture was Honduras. We used to go do medical missions in the mountains, but it provided me with medical expertise. And again, I'm looking at it in the aspect of how God was leading. So he was making these decisions even though I didn't know about it. Okay, gearing me up to where we would eventually be and what he would use us for. When I got out of the military in 91, for those that remember the Bush 1 years, it was pretty bad. I couldn't get a job, bounced around for a while. Next slide, please. And I finally went to work for the Department of Agriculture using my medical, because it was like, do you want to go back to school? And I said, no, I don't want to go back to school. I didn't have any military benefits for school. So I took this job, and believe it or not, this is what I was doing when I became an Adventist. I was working in this job as a meat and poultry inspector. So you can imagine what happened, right? I mean, I start becoming an elder in the churches. We go to elders meetings. Oh, what do you do? I work for the Department of Agriculture as a meat and poultry inspector. You can imagine what other Adventists would say, right? You have to come talk to our church about what you see. And that's really how it began. I started going to church, just sitting there saying, okay, people, you want to know what it is? Here's what Ellen White says. Here's what the Bible says. And here's what we see in the USDA.
But it was when he became Adventist that we met.
That we met then.
He was already, what, a year?
No, that was the same year I became an Adventist, I met Ellen. Okay, I'm not going to get into my problems, but my wife left me when I became an Adventist, my other wife. So she said, either you're God or me. And I said, that's not a decision I could make. This is serious in life. So she said, okay, bye. And so it was just like, okay. And I met her like a month or two after that, just in casual meeting, because I had an older daughter that I got custody of. And so she was going to the Pathfinders. And not to get into too much of this, but my wife was helping the Pathfinder leader at my church, even though she went to a different church. And it was months later then that he got us together saying, would you? No, it wasn't even a year, because that was August and that was January. Yeah. So the first time we dated was April 1st of 1999.
Yes.
Yeah. And we were married by July. Okay, next slide. Here's some pictures. That middle picture, that's that middle one with the long hair. That was 1 month after I was baptized as a Seventh-day Adventist. And my wife, when she first met me, we found out about this later. She said, I would never date him because of his long hair. And a month later, I got so tired of my long hair, I cut it all off. You can see this bottom right-hand side. Let's see, as you're looking at it. Yeah, the right-hand side. I pretty much went from that to that within like a month or so. And that upper picture above that, that was a Christmas play at a Baptist church, because I was always bouncing around after I started reading the Bible. I started to go from church to church. So I've been to almost every church: Catholic, Lutheran, Wesleyan, Methodist, Baptist, Adventist. Obviously, Adventist is where I stopped. And I'd like to get into that sometime, but might not be the time really, because we want to look at other things. But that was a Christmas play. They took one look at me and they said, "Would you play Jesus?" And I don't know, does that look like a good representation, even though we don't know what he looks like? Okay, so some of the other are other pictures, other churches. The bottom left, the three wise men. Okay, the guy in the middle, he was my mentor. He's the one that sat down and said, "You want to be an Adventist? I'm going to teach you what an Adventist really means." And I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for him. The guy on the other side, you can't really tell, he had long hair too. He also worked for the USDA, and it was after working with him that we started talking and that I became an Adventist. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's talk about how man works. We've seen so far how God was leading through all this, through our individual lives. My wife beforehand, even growing up Adventist, learning all the things of Adventist, me not learning anything, okay, because I was not part of anything. But when I started to sit down and read the Bible, I read it without any blinders on. Yes, I did go to a church at least once back in 71, but I didn't learn anything. I never went to church really apart from that. So I sat down and I started reading the Bible with no blinders. That's why it's especially fun that, the Sabbath school lesson, because that was one of the first things I noticed is just like, I'm reading all this and I don't see anywhere where it talks about hell, because you still pick up things, right? You see things in movies, you see things in cartoons. Somebody dies and they picture this guy on a cloud with a harp, and then you start reading the Bible, you're going, that's funny. I don't notice this anywhere in the Bible. I can't see where they get this at all. As a matter of fact, I almost quit being Christian before God brought me into the Adventist church, just because I said, you know what? Everybody carries around a Bible and nobody reads it, because I don't know where they get these ideas. And no, every church I bounced around to would be like, what do you do with this text? What do you do with that? Well, we don't worry about, that's Old Testament. We don't, and all this. And it's just like, oh, come on. This is a Bible, right? Genesis to Revelation, I read this, the harmony and all of it, and yet you're telling me all these excuses. Okay, so this is how how now God expects us to work. And before we do this, I just want to bring this one text out. Go ahead and flick it, because it's just going to, if you ever have a problem understanding where that faith and works fits in, here's a perfect text. Romans 12:1. This was almost my sermon text, but it's just, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Everything we're going to present to you for what we did, there's no way I'm going to go before God and say, you have to save me, because look at all this good stuff we did down in Brazil and all over the United States and all this. Because you know what God's going to tell me? It was your reasonable service. It is not salvational. It is important. Your works towards God are very important. They're not salvational. It is your reasonable service. It's what you owe to God, not what he owes to you. It's what you owe to him. And that's why God can say, to those on the goats on the left hand, you didn't do any of these things. You didn't show my love to others. That was your reasonable service, and you failed to do it. I would have saved you, but you failed to do what was reasonably acceptable. That's all it is. That's how it fits in. Okay, next. So, in 2006, I just up and quit the USDA, right? I've been an Adventist. Well, let's see, I converted in 98, and that was 8 years before. And I always kept sitting around saying, God, why am I still in the USDA? I'm a vegetarian. I'm a vegan now. I have to watch them slaughter animals all day long. I can surely go around to the churches as an ex-USDA inspector as much as I could as a current USDA inspector, telling them how bad things really are, right? So finally we quit, and I won't get into the whole story, but we went to Laurel Brook, Tennessee. Everybody familiar with the Laurel Brook Academy? Okay, it's in Laurel Brook, Tennessee. It was her oldest son. We were looking for a school for him. And that's a story in itself. If we took the time to tell you everything, we'd be here for hours. But yeah, they presented me a job. They said, "Why don't you come be the boys' dean?" And gee, I know, but and I said, we can't do that. I can't go from $5,000 a month down to $500. And they said, okay, if you don't have any faith, that's fine. And finally, we went back and I prayed about it, and it's just like, no, we do. Let's do it. Let's start working for God. Okay, next. So this is our last year we were there. That's the boys we had in the dorm. Ellen was the school cook there for a while. So, and I was the boys' dean, and we raised our two kids. Samuel didn't want to get in the picture, so Sarah's in the middle, in pink, obviously, and my wife's in green, and I'm behind them in the back in the red. And then, so we worked there for 2 years. And then finally I said, you know what? Let's go do something really big. And that's when her story and children's story came up, because we were being offered all kinds of stuff, Honduras, India, even various places in the United States. And it was just like, okay, Lord, where do you want us? You know, and we started throwing out fleeces. We started praying about it and saying, Lord, just open up where you would. And that's when God opened up Brazil. And like she said, she kept saying, I'm not going to Brazil. It's like, okay, well, we can set it to the side, but God eventually brought us there. Okay, next slide then. So 2008, for 4 years, we went down to Rio de Janeiro. Now we got a little bit to say about this one. So next slide, please. So at first we went to this Recanto de Vida Saudável, which just means, I don't mean to monopolize the time. So
The name of it is just like
the retreat of healthy life.
Yeah.
It was a Wildwood clinic. Everybody familiar with Wildwood? They didn't own it, but they just were on the board over it.
Yeah.
Okay, because they eventually pulled off away from this. I won't get into it, but it wasn't the best place to be. We had a school, which is the bottom right hand. My wife was doing the cooking there. This was the bottom left hand. Next slide. Even our kids helped out there, which, you know, always get your kids involved. You want to raise them right for God, they got to get involved with God's ways, right? So they were doing the cleaning. The bottom right hand was actually her mom's house, and that's her oldest brother, the one that was in the yellow shirt. Okay, when she was given hers. Okay, now this is when we actually first started. That upper one, the CIEP 130, that was our very first health service we gave there. It was for the mayor of the town where we live, which is called Itaboraí. There was 800 people there. That was our very first health evangelism that we did there. Not one Adventist. This was just, we were given health principles. The bottom one was expo, a health expo that the union was doing. They invited us there. The other two, upper one on this side, right side, was a cooking class. The bottom one was a week of prayer. Okay, next slide. I'll start with the bottom left-hand side because that was an ADRA meeting. Everybody's here familiar with ADRA. That is what kickstarted our ministry down there, because we went and we were invited to talk. And that's the funny thing about it, because you never know when something is going to just really strike gold. Yeah, because we went to this, nobody knew who we were. We got up, we spoke about health, and these people had never heard and this is Adventist, right? These people never really heard the Adventist message before. They were just overwhelmed with what we presented. That when we were done, everybody came around to us. You got to come to our church. You got to come. Finally, the guy who was running the place said, no, break it up. We got people that are talking. You all are making too much noise. Take it outside. We got up, walked outside. Everybody followed us. Finally, he came out and he said, no, we need people back in here to listen to the next speaker. So he said, look, we'll take care of this afterwards. But we had so many invitations from church after that. Then the one next to it, also on the bottom side, I'll let you talk about that, how that came about.
I was invited to a friend of mine used to go to the TV and do cooking classes in women's live show.
Program,
yeah. And she had cancer and she wanted to quit. So she asked me if I wanted to do in her place. So I started, we did about 3 years and a half TV. Was at least in the beginning was very often because my line was a little bit different than the lady that was doing before. So they got very interested. So I was doing more than once a month. And then with time, they got me into other programs of this TV. Is not a it was a Christian TV, Pentecostal. The only thing they asked me was, do not say your church name. Don't mention your church denomination. Don't say nothing. Can I talk Bible? I asked them, and they said, yes, you are allowed. And the funny thing was that many people would listen to what I was saying and call me and say, but sister, what church do you go to? And guess what? Most of the time, were a Adventist on the other side of the line asking me, because what I was presenting from the Bible, they could see that was a Adventist message. So we had opportunity to do 3 years and a half of TV show.
Yeah, whenever they would zoom in on her, they would usually put our telephone number or email address underneath and along with her name, so people would know how to contact her. So that's what around. Who knows what OCI is? Outpost Centers International. Okay, there's a few hands. They're the ones that support ministries all over the world. So they did a little meeting down there in Brazil, August 27th, 2010, and my wife was the cook for them as well. So there's a group. Some people may recognize some of the names. Marcus Yodis, who was the president of OCI, is in the upper left hand of that photo. Have our kids in the bottom. Okay, next. So then we came back. God put me through massage school right when we came back between 12 and 13. But the next place we went was Oklahoma Academy. How many are familiar with that one? So we went to Oklahoma Academy, and while there, I went with them to Ghana, Africa, to Accra. If you want to go ahead and advance the next slide, that's Oklahoma Academy. My wife's standing on the far side in the back on the sidewalk, and I'm right there. Okay, next. And that's when we went to Africa. And then next, and Messiah's Mansion. Anybody familiar with Messiah's Mansion? They come and make these full size. They shipped over, I think they have 5 of these. And they shipped one of these over to Ghana, Africa. And this was set up in the SDA University there in Ghana. So they taught everybody about the sanctuary. You might think that, like, again, just like I said before about the health message down in Brazil, that Adventists all over the world understand the Adventist message no matter where you go. And it's not necessarily true. Like I said, we started preaching the health message as it is down in Brazil. And they were like, and same with the sanctuary message over in Africa. It was just like they'd never heard it before. It's just like, wow, you would think that this is fundamental, but not necessarily so. How many of us don't really know our own message and what makes the message of Adventism, or more specifically, the Bible, so relevant?
And the health message, it goes with the 3 angels message. Mm-hmm. So is hand in hand.
Yes, so providing those two together. Okay, next. While I was in Africa towards the end, coming back home, my wife went from Oklahoma Academy to Monument Valley. And so on my way back, of course, we had no telephone conversation because I didn't have any internet or anything there. So as soon as I arrived back in the States and I called her, because I had signal again, she said, I'm out in Monument Valley. Don't come back to Dallas-Fort Worth with the rest of them. Continue on. And I think to Durango, Colorado. I flew to Phoenix and Durango. They picked me up and took me out to Monument Valley, which would be our next trip. Okay, next. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with Monument Valley. We saw this. We could see this from our dining room window for 4 years after the 4 years we lived there. We could just look right out our dining room window. It wasn't that close. It was a little bit more further away, but this was our view. Beautiful. Okay, next. For those of you that are not familiar with it, that's how big the Navajo Nation is. when we're down in Brazil and we talk like this, we tell them, now we were in Rio de Janeiro, and a lot of people don't realize, but Rio is like New York. There's a city and there's a state. So sometimes if we say Rio, you think city, just like people outside might hear New York and think city, but you're talking about the state. So we tell them that that area right there is over twice the size of the state of Rio de Janeiro. Okay, next. Here's a breakdown of it. Monument Valley is way at the top in that blue circle, Monument Valley Mission. You might be familiar with La Vida Mission. How many are familiar with that? Or Holbrook? Okay, if you notice, they're actually off the reservation. They're really outside. They're right on the borders, but outside the reservation. We were one of the only missions that was actually inside. Chinle, which is right in the middle, was the only other one. And the Hopi Reservation is landlocked inside the Navajo Reservation. Okay, next. This is what our mission looked like, the church, the school, and then we took this from the mesas up on top. We climbed up on top and took pictures. So that's what the mission looked like. And then next, this was our job. We drove this truck around. The upper left-hand side is what it looked like before the sun took care of it. That's the way it looked right underneath that when we took over, all sun-bleached and pretty much that nice color gone. But we drove this thing around. It was like a portable church or a portable health ministry. We could do whatever we want out of there. It was really state of the art when we got it. It even had a satellite dish. You could take this thing out and park it, and you could do just about anything. It had a projector. It had everything, sound system. We gutted it because that was 1998 when they made this, and this was like 2014, and my laptop could do everything that everything else in there could do. So we were left with just an empty that we would take it around and we would invite people in, generally do health ministry. Next, that's us doing some health ministry with, at that time, it was just some kids. We don't have too many pictures of us actually working with it, which is the bad thing, but this is what we did for 4 years. Next, and this is some of the pictures, though, when we would take it around and park it. So this was 2 of the places we took. See, everybody's a little bit jacketed. It's still kind of cold there in the wintertime. But we would open it up and we would do evangelism. Okay, next. My wife would do cooking classes. One was Chinle. The other one was Kinlichi. Okay. And then next. And then NNSDP, you see on the gazebo thing, it's the Navajo Nation Special Diabetes Program. Whenever they were doing something, they would come knock on our door. Can you help us out? Sure, we can. That's what we're here for. So we would do cooking classes. We would teach them how to eat right. Diabetes is a terrible problem there. Almost all of them have diabetes, as well as alcohol problems. So we would try to help them.
4 and 5 have diabetes.
Yeah. But the good news is they react better if you get them off and get them onto a good diet. You know, they would react better than normal people. When I say normal, I shouldn't say normal, but you know what I mean, than white people. But, you know, they bounce back better as well. Okay. So then we went back to Rio, okay, because there's a space in between there. That's when I went through nursing school. We moved up to Moab for a while. And then we finally said, well, we want to get back into missionary work now that I've gotten my nursing degree and everything. So let's get back.
A year after we left the mission closed down. Yeah. We do not have church. We do not have the lifestyle anymore, neither the school in Monument Valley. We have only the other missions around. But Monument Valley, as a church or mission, there is no church there anymore.
So when we got back to Brazil, it kind of all clicked back in. You know, we were back into a thing. Took a little while for people to realize, hey, they're back. It's been, almost 10 years since we left there. But then people started inviting us again. Okay, time to get back into it. So this is some of the things that we did, some of the things that they made up. In other words, that it's class for parents is what they call it. So there's certain people there that put their kids in like the Pathfinders, but they're not Adventists themselves. So while the kids are doing their Adventist activities, the parents would come sit and we would be like one of the groups to go there and teach them about some of the principles, like our health principles. So that's why at the top it says Escola de Pais, okay, school of the parents. And I won't translate it all, but you see that they would put us down and let us teach health to people. That's preaching. And okay, next. We would go to little churches. So no church is too big. Like she said, we never charge. People are always asking, what do you charge to come to church? We don't charge anything. We are wholly dependent upon God. That's what we're here for now, is because we come back every once in a while. That's what we decided. This would be my tent making job. We'll come back. We'll make money if we need it. We'll go back. If God grants us money from people, fine. We accept it. But we don't ask for anything from anybody. We want people to know that we're not making a business out of the gospel. Okay? If anybody has a problem sitting there saying, well, let's face it, some people that are outside the church, that's usually what they say, right? Why is it churches are always asking for money? Like God's not good on money. He needs money from people. It's just like, no, he doesn't. We know that he does it so that we remain humble, right? We're not dependent upon money that we make. Every time I hate to say pay tithe, give my tithe back to God where it belongs. It's not a matter of, oh, well, I'm not doing it grudgingly. Thank you, Lord, for what you provided. Here's only your 10% that you're asking plus your offerings. It's yours, Lord. Thank you for letting me live on the rest, because it's very nice. Okay, some cooking classes. We would do them everywhere. Next, I think there's some more. This is underneath that one church that we go to. And then we go even outside to the little churches. I love the little churches better. Really, it's just like in the United States, right? The little churches, you get more homey, right? Because you get to know everybody. These big churches, you get lost.
The church where we have our membership is the church that my mother goes to. Is the church that when I was my late teens, my mother was back then. Well, the Adventist church in Brazil has grown so much that in my childhood, we had one conference for 3 straight states. Now in Rio State alone, we have 3 conferences. And my mother's church now is a over 400 member church, but this church has divided itself already that my mother walks to 7 churches. So the farthest, she probably walks about 20 minutes to it. So it is a conference church now. That's why it's over 400.
Brazil has more Adventists than any other country. So you might think, okay, so what do you do as an Adventist there? Well, there's a lot of people in Brazil, and there's still areas that aren't reached. So, I mean, everybody familiar with like the Amazon missions there. That's David Gates's daughter and son-in-law that are there. We know them. We met them at OCI. Here's just some various pictures. We visited that church in 2009, and it looked like it was not used. It really looked like it was abandoned. So we had a chance to drive by it when we got back there just last year. And here was a nice little thriving church again. We actually had a chance to stop in and worship with them and spend a nice day with the people that were there. It was really a blessing. Okay, next. This is the same town. That's us with our kids when they were small in front of this locomotive that was kind of like on display. And then here's our kids all grown up, 2021, around the same locomotive. I
barely can see Samuel and Sarah
I know.
there.
I had to take the picture. The first time we had a friend with us, so he took the picture of all of us. So I took the picture down below, so I'm not in it. Otherwise, it would be all of us again. Okay, next. And there is the Christ my wife was talking about in the children's story, if you're not familiar with it. This sits up on top of the hill overlooking Rio de Janeiro, so you can see it just about anywhere except for the skyscrapers. That's me in 2007. That's our family again, 2021.
There you can see the twins a little bit.
Yeah. That's a little grainy, but this is the good points because, working for God really takes care of you. Okay. So we get to see all these amazing animals. This is a grainy picture because the toucans don't get very close.
And usually That is my prayer. If I see woods around, I ask God to show me 1 toucan, and that is one of them. This one was flying in 3. We were doing worship on outside with the other family, and they kept going from one side to the other, kind of far. And I asked the Lord to send them closer. And soon enough, they came closer, close enough that we could see, define their beak, the colors. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, they're neat to see flying because they got that big beak out in front of them when they're flying. Okay, next. This one was actually from a cooking class that my wife was doing, and it had all kinds of monkeys in the back. So while she's in there doing the cooking class, I'd pop in every once in a while to take some pictures so we can show people, what we're doing. But go outside and take pictures of the monkeys.
Some of the bananas from the cookies ended up going to the the monkeys.
They are so gentle. If you go offer them some banana, or they'll take it with their mouth, just going.
And sometimes they hold your hand while you're holding the banana to them.
Yeah, they'll hold your hand while they eat from it. Okay, so what's the point of all this? Again, we're not trying to show you necessarily what we did. We're not patting ourselves on the back saying, oh, look at the great work we're doing. Okay, this is something that God has instilled into us, just like God has a purpose for every person in here. He has something, if you go back and you think, what are my strengths that God can use? This is just an example of what the strengths he used for us. But he has something for you all, whether you're actively doing it or whether you haven't found it yet. The point is to start examining yourself, praying to God. God, Lord, what are you opening up for me? We're getting ready to do some things here locally. We're doing it, if I can say this, even though I've talked to some people, but it's pretty much apart from the church. But we're getting ready. We're going to go to the senior center. We got already the place lined up where we're going to rent. We're going to start doing health presentations. We're going to start doing cooking classes here locally in the time we got left. And we're going to start trying to see if we can augment the church here a little bit, because we're not just doing it for health purposes. In other words, when we present health to them, we let them know you can gain benefits by taking the Adventist health message. But without that connection to God, you're really not getting that much of a benefit out of it. And you can't really take it to any other denomination, because no other denomination has the health message. They have maybe a health message, but nothing that's going to effectively get it. And I did it for the one little cooking class we had here, and I do have it if anybody here is interested. But, God is opening up the Adventist health message in a big way. In my bag there, I have Time magazine, I have Newsweek magazine, I have U.S. News and World Report. They're telling people that if you want to live to be 100, live like a Seventh-day Adventist. We are known for our health. God is opening up the health the same way he did with Jesus. How did Jesus present doctrine? First by curing them of their illnesses and then presenting it. God is opening up the door. We need to get on board with what God is doing and say, yes, this is what we need to do. Okay?
We would like to open to you. If you want to sit down with us, we can do a counseling with you, to sit down with you, see your health problems, see where you want to get, how you can get little by little. Because many quotations of Ellen White says that happiness in life you can get only if your health is good. So, without health, I always say this way: when you have a fever, can you sit down and study the Bible? Can you sit down at least? I can't. With fever, I cannot even sit down. I feel dizzy. I feel all kinds of weird stuff. So when we are sick, can we learn about God? Can we get close to him? Can we understand who he is and what salvation he wants to bring to us? So if we start here, how to be well here, if we bring other people inside, we will be all fit to help them also. Amen.
Okay, so remember, lift up your eyes, look on the fields, for they are already white for the harvest. I believe our closing hymn is 316.
Number 316. Just move out the 316. Please stand.